A man whose crimes have been featured on Crimewatch numerous times over the last 20 years. We now know that Peter Tobin is a serial killer who has spent his whole life targeting young girls to abduct, rape and murder. Well, the 63-year-old drifter was finally convicted last week of the murder of teenager Dinah McNichol, ending 18 years of uncertainty for her family. As Dinah's father, Ian, gives his first interview on television since the trial, detectives ask for your help to determine how many more victims have suffered at Tobin's hands. Rav joined the team on Operation Anagram, the nationwide investigation into the serial killer's crimes.
A sex offender has been found guilty of raping and murdering a Polish student in Glasgow.
Peter Tobin has been charged with the murder of Vicky Hamilton, who went missing 16 years ago.
The serial killer, Peter Tobin, is convicted of another murder. 18-year-old Dinah McNichol went missing in Essex in 1991.
After all these years, we at last know the truth and justice has prevailed.
He will never get out of prison. He will stay there until he dies.
We now know at least 3 young women died in the most horrific circumstances at the hands of Peter Tobin. With speculation rife over how many more girls he's murdered, police need your help to establish whether Tobin is in fact one of the most prolific serial killers this country has ever seen.
Yes, he will rot in jail. I very much doubt he'll ever get out of jail. But you can't deny that sense of closure to any other victims' families. They need to know what happened to their child.
Operation Anagram is the largest investigation of its kind ever set up in the UK. For the last 3 years, detectives have painstakingly pieced together Tobin's life, looking for evidence that links him to or eliminates him from other crimes. It all began in September 2006.
Police investigating the disappearance of a Polish student in Glasgow say they expect a body which was found hidden in a church to be identified later today.
The missing student was last seen in the company of this man, 60-year-old Peter Tobin, who'd been working as a handyman at the church. He too has since disappeared.
A doctor in a London hospital recognised the wanted man as a patient who'd admitted himself under a false name days earlier.
Yeah, can I get a P&C descriptive check on a Peter Tobin?
The man has gone on trial in Edinburgh, accused of raping and murdering a Polish student.
Judge told Peter Tobin that he should serve a minimum of 21 years and described him as an evil man.
So, Dave, it was after the murder of Angelica that really started Operation Anagram. So why was it created?
We started looking, as we would do as a normal investigation, looking at the life of this individual. And in the early stages of that investigation, we established that this was an individual that travelled throughout the UK and used numerous names. He frequented places where vulnerable women would hang out and had as many as 20 SIM cards linked to his mobile phone within a year. So the suspicion at that time was, this is a guy that's done this before.
Detectives were right. Within months, Tobin was linked to the disappearance of 2 other young girls. In February 1991, 15-year-old Vicky Hamilton vanished from a bus stop in Bathgate near Edinburgh. It was one of the largest missing persons inquiries that Scotland had ever seen.
My colleagues in West Lothian are now gravely concerned for Vicky Hamilton.
Every day for 16 years, we woke up thinking, is today the day we'll find Vicky? Is today the day we'll find she's been murdered?
It was only when detectives from Operation Anagram discovered Tobin had been living in Bathgate at the same time Vicky went missing that the shocking events surrounding her disappearance came to light. Tobin had abducted, drugged and sexually assaulted Vicky before murdering her. He then mutilated her body, transported her 500 miles to his New Margate home and buried the schoolgirl in his back garden. Within 6 months, another teenager had gone missing. 18-year-old Dinah McNichol disappeared on her way back home from a music festival in Hampshire.
That slim hope was always there. And I never changed the lock, just in case he would come back. But she never did.
It was nearly 2 decades before Ian McNichol was to find out what had happened to his daughter. The man who she'd hitched a lift with was Peter Tobin. Only he knows the horrors he subjected Dinah to before he murdered her. Tobin buried her next to Vicky.
You will only understand it if it ever happens to you or a member of your family. Then you will understand, and that's one thing I do not wish on anyone.
You can see behind you, this massive board is really what Operation Anagram is all about. This huge, great timeline. But there are these big purple blotches are areas that you don't know so much about him. And these are detailed on the board here. For example, 1977 to 78, 85 to 86. And you really want to know more about what he was up to back then.
The key is what he looked like throughout the years. People may be looking at that, recognise him as another individual. Or, more importantly, a bit of information about him. So this was an individual that could ingratiate himself with anyone. He was an affable type character. He had numerous girlfriends, numerous close friends, some of whom will probably not have come forward.
Unfortunately, I don't think Vicky was his first. As a sense of relief when you finally find out that, yes, this is what's happened. And even just to know that if a body has been missing, just to be able to bury it. I mean, there's no greater sense of closure than just to know that you've eventually done the right thing.
And people are still waiting to hear from about how their loved ones died, how their family have died. How many more?
How many more? Well, I'm joined by Detective Superintendent David Swindle, who is heading up this huge Operation Anagram. You're here tonight because you want to reveal more information about Peter Tobin, and you think that what we know and what he's been convicted for may not be the end of the story. Tell us more.
Yes, exactly. I mean, his offences, what he's done to these women in the past is horrific, and without doubt, he has probably committed more. And that is why it's important that the public come forward and supply any information about him.
Now, it's fair to say almost every force in the country is involved in this huge nationwide investigation. Tonight you want to reveal elements of his life that were not known to you and your fellow officers. Tell us what you know that's new about Peter Tobin and what he got up to.
Yes, it is. It's a massive UK-wide operation, and information has been coming from various parts of the UK. And some recent information, very recent information, is the fact that he was using sex workers. And that itself may be something that people don't want to come forward about.
Okay, and there was also, he was a member of sort of biker gangs as a hobby?
Gangs, yes, he was involved in biker gangs in his early days. Yes.
Okay, so we want to hear from anybody who might have just met him innocently in one of those biker gangs and something rings a bell. They could have a tiny piece of information. You have also put together this sort of, as well as the timeline, you've gathered a kind of photo album of pictures of Peter Tobin, which again might be important to people. Tell us about those.
Yes, this is photos of Peter Tobin through his life, but people might not know him as Peter Tobin. They might know him as some of the other aliases, and a lot of these aliases, the aliases that are on the board, are sort of combinations of his name, and he's taken the names of other people. So while the photographs are there, it may not be the name Tobin they know these photographs relating to.
OK, we've got the names on the board here. We've also got them on the website, so people can look for these known aliases there. Tell me also, David, about dates. There are a couple of periods that are important that you don't really have any information on so far.
Yes, 77, 78, late 85 and early, in fact, most of 1986. And what I would say is, these are important dates, but please don't focus on specifically these dates. It's small bits of information about Peter Tobin throughout his whole life we're interested in.
OK, and that's what helped in the past. You've brought some jewellery. Tell me why you think this might be important.
Well, the question has to be asked, why does a serial killer have women's jewellery? And this is jewellery we know that he had in his possession in 1993 and recently 2006. That is important, and we want to know where he got that jewellery from. OK, so people could recognise some of it really is very distinctive indeed, and we do know about serial killers keeping trophies, and the jewellery that you found is not linked to any of the crimes that he so far has been convicted of, and that's why it might be of interest if people can help you identify these pieces of jewellery. All of the new details, including the jewellery, including the aliases, including the photographs about Tobin's life, are on a specially dedicated section of our website tonight, together with the photos, the aliases, as I mentioned. Do take a look. If you have ever encountered Tobin, you could have that vital information that police need. You can call now 0500 600 600, or you could call the independent charity Crime Stoppers. You can do that anonymously. I'll give you their number. It's 0800 555 111. But for now, thank you very much. Now we're going to go over to Rav with the first